all, I'm Sian. The reading is from Matthew chapter 13, reading verses 24 to 30, then 36 to 43. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed ears, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let them hear." And now I'll hand over to Ben, who will explain that passage to us.
Thank you, Sian. My name's Ben. I'm one of the pastors at Wood Green. Why don't we pray to God before we come to his word. Father, please help us this morning to come to your word with humble hearts. Please teach us, please encourage us, please help us as we seek to hear from you. Amen. Well, look, I'm sure you've all been in this situation. You'll recognise this. It's tea time. You're sat around the table and there's one piece of cake left and two of you want it. Maybe this was the case for you growing up. It was in my household. And it always went like this. Two people want a piece of cake and you'd kind of argue and fight. And so you've got to share it. You've got to share it. And then would come the phrase, "You cut, I choose." And the person who's kind of given the task of cutting the final piece of cake into two, knowing that the other is going to choose, takes forever to try and get it as perfect as possible. So it's a complete 50-50 split. You see, from an early age, we have a real sense of fairness, don't we? Like we understand justice. And that never leaves us. We long for justice. Like a casual stroll through Twitter reveals sort of uncountable numbers of hashtags campaigning for justice for all kinds of things, calling for wrongs to be overturned on all kinds of issues. Look at the root of the Black Lives Matter stuff, those protests, the riots in Hong Kong, the exam results needing to be overturned in the summer. It all comes from a sense of wanting things to be right. We spot things when they're not good. We want justice. We hate being wronged. Inequality and injustice break our hearts. Evil ruins everything. Well, the good news this morning, such good news, good news for all of humanity, is that one day everything will be made right. Wrongs will be overturned, and evil will be no more. Imagine that. Imagine a world where there is no longer any evil. How can this be? Well, in our passage this morning, Jesus tells us that one day it will happen in the kingdom of heaven. That's what this parable is about. Look down at verse 24. Jesus tells us that this is what the kingdom of heaven is like. It's one of those parables that tells us about the kingdom. So let's dive in, shall we? Well, there are two halves to our reading. In the first, Jesus tells the parable. And then we get a section later in the chapter where his disciples come to him and ask him to explain it. Look, it's down there in verse 36. Do you see? The disciples come to Jesus and say, explain what you're talking about. It's a great example of what parables do, actually. Parables separate those who are seeking the truth and those who are not. And we see in that verse that Jesus leaves the crowd. He's finished teaching. He leaves the crowd, and it's only his disciples that come after and say, explain that to us. They were seeking the truth. The parable is a story that separates. And wonderfully for you and me in the second section, Jesus does explain what's going on. It's a gift for a preacher, isn't it? There really is no excuse. You see, Jesus paints the picture of a farmer who's sown good seed out in his field. But then one day his helpers come to him and say, look, what's going on? There are weeds everywhere. We didn't sow those. It was just good seed you put in that field. What's going on? And the farmer immediately recognises and realises that an enemy has snuck in and has put filthy weeds everywhere in an attempt to ruin the crop. And he decides to wait until the wheat is fully grown before harvest comes. And at that point the weeds are ripped out and thrown into the fire. It's an evocative image, isn't it? You can imagine it straight away in your mind's eye. And the imagery comes even more alive as Jesus explains what's going on. Look, from verse 37 onwards, we see, look, the farmer is Jesus. The Son of Man is a title that Jesus used for himself. The field is the world. The wheat are his people. The wheat belong to Jesus. They are his. And the weeds are people who belong to the devil. The weeds are evil. Harvest time is the end of the age, the last day of history. And at harvest time, Jesus will return. And he will send his angels to remove anything that causes sin, anything that is evil, and it will be ripped out and thrown into the blazing furnace where there will be a weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is why evil will be no more. Because one day, Jesus will return to judge the earth. One day, Jesus will return to judge the world. But let's be honest, it's horrifying language, isn't it? It's not a topic that we really like to think about or talk about. It's not the sort of thing that's going to get you a good reputation in the public square, is it? Because to be honest, as much as we like the idea of justice, we shy away from judgment and the idea of a final judgment. It feels kind of archaic, kind of last century, kind of, it conjures up images of a lonely bloke with a sandwich board saying the end is nigh. It's all kind of doom and gloom. And well, look, we have to see it here, and we have to recognise that final judgment, the reality of final judgment, it really is good news. It's good news. It's a really, really good thing that one day evil will be no more. Wickedness will not go unpunished. Evil people will not be allowed to get away with what they have done. And imagine that future without evil, where the righteous shine like the sun forever in glory, with no selfishness, no bitterness, no anger, no jealousy, no discord, no anxiety, no stress, no angst, no sadness, no regret. Oh, it's glorious, isn't it? A future with no evil at all. That is good news. There will be a day when evil will be no more, because Jesus will return to judge the world. But until that day comes, what do we do? What do we do? Well, this parable helps us to understand what is going on in the world right now. You see, as followers of Jesus, as wheat, we can get caught up sometimes, I think, sort of bemoaning the state of the world around us, decrying the collapse of moral standards in our society, longing for the days when we were a Christian country. Wickedness seemingly going unpunished. Look, I'm sure we've all felt like Asaph in Psalm 73. I'm sure you know it. Let me just read a few verses. You remember Asaph looks out on the world and he says, I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from common human burdens. They're not plagued by human ills. Pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves with violence. From their callous hearts comes iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limits. They scoff and speak with malice. With arrogance they threaten oppression. Their mouths lay claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of the earth. Therefore their people turn to them and drink up waters in abundance. They say, how would God know? Does the Most High know anything? This is what the wicked are like. Always free of care, they go on amassing wealth. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure. I have washed my hands in innocence. I think we feel that, don't we, sometimes? What's the point? Look at the world around us. It's a mess. There's evil everywhere. Why am I bothering? It's a cry of frustration. But look, this parable gives us hope. It helps us. Look, it's realistic, yeah. Look, you see in the beginning, on the earth, there is a spiritual battle going on between Jesus and his people and the devil and his. The devil is using evil to disrupt, to distract, to destroy. Life isn't going to be easy now. But did you catch why Jesus doesn't get his helpers to rip out the weeds straight away? Did you see why Jesus delays? It's because amongst the weeds, in amongst the mess, Jesus is faithfully allowing his wheat to grow. It's there in verse 29. His people. He doesn't want to risk uprooting the wheat before it's fully grown. Jesus is waiting for all of his good crop to finish growing before beginning the harvest. He is bringing people into his kingdom. And so right now, in the middle of a global pandemic, Jesus is growing his kingdom. Amongst persecuted minorities, Jesus is growing his kingdom. Whilst human rights abuses are going on across the world, Jesus is growing his kingdom. As destitute and desperate women are trafficked across borders, Jesus is growing his kingdom. In prisons, in sweatshops, in brothels, in war zones, Jesus is growing his kingdom. He's growing his kingdom. He's allowing the wheat to flourish. That changes everything, doesn't it? If we remember that, if we hold on to that, look, every day that Jesus doesn't return is not a victory for the devil and evil. Don't think that on those days the devil and evil win. No, it's another day in which he is growing his kingdom. It's another day when people are turning to him and becoming his. Awesome Cutlery, who write kids' songs, we use some of them at church, have a great chorus that goes like this. It's a new day to sing your praise. It's a new day to walk in your ways. It's a new day to make you known. It's a new day to see your kingdom grow. It's wonderfully simple, isn't it? Isn't that good? I love the simplicity of kids' songs sometimes. They don't have to beat around the bush. They don't have to dress anything up. Let's make it our prayer, shall we? That each day we get up, we see is a day to see Jesus growing his kingdom. We should long for Jesus to return, of course. We should long for evil to be no more. But we can be patient and trust that he is growing his kingdom. And let's be honest, it's a good job Jesus is patient, isn't it? It's a good job that he delayed. Because otherwise there wouldn't be any wheat. There wouldn't be any wheat. No one deserves to be in the kingdom of heaven. We all naturally cause sin. Our hearts are selfish. We deserve nothing more to be ripped up like weeds and thrown into the fire. And yet verse 43 at the end talks about the righteous who are left after the final judgment, shining like the sun. Who are the righteous? They're people who've been made right with God. They are perfect. They are holy. Their evil is no more. It's incredible. Wicked sinners, transformed, selfish rebels now serving the King. And look, if you're a follower of Jesus, that's your story. Your evil is no more. How? Not because anything have you done. No, your evil is no more because Jesus was judged for the world. Jesus was judged for the world. But the only way we can be brought into the kingdom of heaven is by Jesus taking the judgment we deserve. That's what was happening as Jesus died on the cross. He bore the judgment of God in our place. It was a great swap, an exchange. He was our substitute. And if you've acknowledged that he took your sin and wickedness, if you have turned back to God through him, then you've gained his righteousness. So that after the final harvest, you will be shining like the sun forever in his kingdom. Now maybe you know that you are not right with God. Well, look, as we finish, it's not too late. It's not too late. Jesus is yet to return. Today is another day where Jesus is growing his kingdom. He's holding out the offer of righteousness to anyone who'll take it. Why don't you come to him now? Commit your life to him, who is offering you a forever future in utter glory, where evil will be no more. Let's pray.